Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this book launch and technical discussion session on taxpayer rights in India. Uh, Unfortunately, our host today, Sana Javed, she's facing some technical difficulties right now, so I'm just taking over. So we have a very esteemed, panel of experts in this event today. Mr. Arvind Datar, Senior Advocate, Professor Rajkumar, Founding Vice Chancellor of the OP Jindal University and Dean of Jindal Global Law School, and of course, my co-editor in the book, Mr. Mukesh Bhutani. All of us, we have gathered to have a brief discussion on this broad issue of taxpayer rights in India. So without any further ado, Professor Rajkumar, I would just request you to proceed with the introductory remarks on the evening.
All right. Thank you very much, Kinshuk. And first of all, let me congratulate the authors of this very, very unique and what promises to be a very interesting book, Taxpayers' Rights, Deciphering the Indian Charter, edited by Mr. Mukesh Bhutani and Professor Kinshuk Jha. We're very delighted that we are hosting this book launch as a part of our tradition at OP Jindal Global University. I'm grateful to all those who have assembled here. In particular, let me begin with Professor Honorable Justice Arjun Sikri, former judge of the Supreme Court of India and the judge of the Singapore Commercial Court, somebody who I could actually call him Professor Sikri as well, having had a very long and distinguished career in the judiciary. Before that, he was actually an academic at the Law Faculty of Delhi University. I'm grateful to him for his presence. We are also expected to have Dr. Vivek Debroy. He may have already joined us, or if he is not, he should be, who is the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Honorable Prime Minister. We have with us Mr. Arvind P. Datar, Senior Advocate at the Madras High Court. I will take a few minutes briefly to, introduce the university and the school, which I'm sure all of you are aware. But I want to bring it into the larger context of what we're trying to do here. One of the things that universities in India, in particular law schools, haven't been doing for a very long time is their relative indifference to contributing towards research, knowledge creation, scholarship, and publications. The evolution of law, the interpretation and reinterpretation of law, to a large extent, is going to be taking place through the work of academics. In fact, if you look at the international law, the writings of academics is one of the most important sources of international law. Arguably, in domestic law, in many jurisdictions around the world, the academic writings and publications and scholarly works of university professors are extremely influential in contributing towards rethinking, reimagining, and reinterpreting the law itself. So I'm very delighted that as a university, we are deeply committed to advancing research. The Jindal Global Law School, as a part of OP Jindal Global University, is for the last 12 years now, has been at the forefront of contributing to research. The nearly 500 plus faculty members, full-time faculty members of Jindal Global Law School are part of the 35 plus research centers that the law school has, in which different forms of research, scholarship, publications, and different types of research work happens. In a way, this, I believe, is absolutely critical for a number of reasons. Now, today's book launch is also important because a book of this kind is a very unique book which talks about taxpayers' rights. And of course, arguably, in the larger Indian context, many have occasionally and rather at times irresponsibly remarked that why should they be paying tax when they feel that the governments of the day have not done enough to ensure that the roads are fine, the street lighting is proper, crime is under control, and cities are safe, and all of that. But regardless of those type of observations, I think from the standpoint of rule of law, tradition and culture, it's important to recognize the role of law in ensuring that those who are expected to pay their taxes ought to pay them. In fact, one of the things that affects and impacts and impinges all of us who are law-abiding citizens is the fact that those who are, adhering to the rule of law end up, paying not only, our regular income taxes, but other forms of taxes that we are all introduced to. I remember very vividly after almost working abroad and studying abroad for 12 years, when me and my wife, when we returned to India in the year 2008, we were attempting to buy a property in India. And something strange was introduced to both of us, which of course we later realized that's of course a common practice or a standard operating procedure. And when we were attempting to buy a property, we were told, not by one particular broker, but everybody whom we engage with, that the transaction will happen in the form of what is in colloquial terms called as 60% black and 40% white. And and after a lot of effort, we ended up finding a seller who was considered to be a more honest seller, who was ready to offer to us something like 60% white money and 40% black. Of course, as a law professor and as a lawyer, one of my conditions to all of them were that we will do 100% check-based transaction in which the property will be registered for the amount that we will pay, and there cannot be any going back on that. Now, I say this because, and the story gets much worse later, because we ended up paying almost 20% more than the cost of what the property he was ready to sell, simply because we insisted that it will be 100% check-based transaction in which the entire cost of the property will be registered, and for that only the money will be transferred and the sale deed will be in consonance with that. And of course, we were for us, we were new to India, but almost all our friends and relatives thought we were somewhat delusional and mad when we did what we did. But the larger point that I want to make is that the question of taxpayers' rights is also at the center of the larger effort to create a culture of rule of law. A problem of this kind, which is mostly not even seen as a problem, is something that we as lawyers, judges, as law-abiding citizens need to be conscious of. I also want to mention that this book is a unique partnership between a very distinguished practitioner, Mr. Mukesh Bhutani, who doesn't need any introduction. He's had a long and distinguished career in the corporate sector, and my own colleague, Professor Kinshuk Jha, who teaches and pursues research in the field of law. Very rarely you find somebody like him who chose to be in academia as opposed to being in private practice, when he could be making a lot more resources for himself. But the fact that he's deeply committed to teaching and research and sees value in making a contribution to academia speaks volumes about his personal commitment and dedication to inspiring young people and others to pursue this. I'm also, of course, grateful to Honorable Justice Sikri and Dr. Debroy and Mr. Arvind Datar, all of whom have chosen to give time on a Saturday afternoon. One of the things the pandemic has done is that it has blurred the gap or any form of difference between what is technically known as the Monday to Friday weekday and the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And I'm very happy that we are doing this, and I'm grateful to all of them for being part of this program. So without further ado, let me congratulate both the authors, the editors, Kinshuk Jha and Mukesh Bhutani, and also the Center for Comparative and International Taxation, the BMR Legal Advocates, Jindal Global Law School and OP Jindal Global University, indeed for hosting this important virtual release of the book Taxpayers' Rights, Deciphering the Indian Charter. Thank you very much.
Over to you,
Thank
sir.
you so much, Dr. Kumar, for setting. Sorry.
Saha, I think you
Thank you
are.
so much, Dr. Rajkumar, for setting.
Sana, your internet is a problem, I think. So maybe we should, Kinshuk, you should continue with this because I think there is some problem in her.
Am I audible?
So now I think there is some issue with your internet. No worries, I'll take over. Thank you so much, Professor Raj, for setting up the context of the discussion which follows now. I now invite Mr. Mukesh Bhutani, my co-editor in the book, and of course, luminary in the field of tax, who needs no introduction. But at the same time, I would definitely request him to set a context for the discussion which we are going to have henceforth, and at the same time also share his experiences when it came to working on this particular project, what inspired him, what led to the sort of investigations which we conducted, and what exactly seems to be the way ahead. So over to you, Mr. Bhutani.
Thank you, Kinshuk. Thank you, Professor C. Rajkumar, Jindal Global Law School. It's indeed a privilege and honor to be in this August gathering with Honorable Justice Sikri, my mentor and senior, Mr. Datar. And we could not have Dr. Vivek Debroy. He dropped out at the last moment, but he sent a recorded message that we will play out. He had some commitments. He was called in for an important meeting. Now, let me try and share some of my experiences. I've been 35 years practicing only tax, first 23 years as a chartered accountant, and then my last 12 years, at the bar. It's a different story. My wife calls it midlife crisis because at the age of 45, I decided to enroll at the bar. But nevertheless, my experiences on both the sides, wearing a consultant's hat as a chartered accountant for most parts of my career working in large firms, and also as a lawyer, had been that taxpayer rights in India as a general rule were not considered as an important topic. I do recall when I was chairing the tax committee for an important chamber of commerce, I introduced this concept of taxpayer rights. In Europe, it was called vertical monitoring. And this vertical monitoring would mean that actually the taxpayer and the tax administration would sit together and look at important tax policy changes, including important steps that the sovereign government is going to take. This concept evolved in largely EU countries. Thereafter, some of the other jurisdictions, particularly Brazil in South America, South Korea in the Asian part of the country, in the Asian part of the globe, were known for the notoriety of the tax administration. And these nations actually adopted the model that the EU had. And this is how the concept became a little bit more pervasive in the late 80s. But if you go to any Commonwealth country, whether it's Canada, UK, Australia, the taxpayer concept is codified somewhere or the other. It is there either in the tax law or there are some very strong administrative practices. Now, India did make an attempt by having what is called tax ombudsman, which unfortunately became a parking place for retired chief commissioners and retired CBDT members, but it really did not do anything. And the learning for the lawmakers at that point in time was, until and unless you have something which is codified, a law which is passed by the parliament, it will not be implemented. Fortunately, we saw that in 2020. Frankly, if you ask me, the 2020 announcement came as a surprise. I, as a tax policy advocate and analyst, had given up the hope that India would see a taxpayer charter. So it was a pleasant surprise. And what was even more pleasing was to see that 4 months after the law was passed by the parliament, none other than the Prime Minister on the 13th of August said, well, this is how the tax charter should look like. There were a set of rights, a set of obligations that were let out in the statement on 13th of August. That was the time the idea of this did come up. I knew quite a few international authors, but I could not find any Indian author until the time I discovered a research paper that my co-editor Kingshuk had done for the Liverpool Law Review. The Liverpool Law Review paper that Kingshuk analyzed several changes that took place in the law in the pre-colonial and the post-colonial era on the issues that taxpayers were facing. And that really, in my view, was the starting point. Well, in the absence of a codified depiction of such rights, historically, it had fallen on the courts to call out what I call it as minimum standards which tax officials should abide by. Most of these standards, actually, if you look at it, have find their origins in the administrative law canon, and those tend to instill a set of principles such as natural justice, reasonableness of standards insofar as actions of the tax officials are concerned. However, the Indian judiciary, particularly the constitutional courts, went beyond that, and it evolved principles in the context of tax law, such as right to representation, rule against bias, protection against prejudice, and safeguards against predetermined actions of the tax administration, right to be cross-examined. These are some of the standards that the constitutional courts evolved. And then they went ahead and said that these are not just minimalistic ideals that should be there in any civil society, but they even went ahead and evolved constitutional doctrines to protect rights of taxpayers. So if you look at many of the celebrated decisions of high courts and the Supreme Court, you will find these principles everywhere. And along with these principles, you will find the idea of taxpayer rights as well. So I'm glad that this idea has evolved. This idea needs to be taken forward. My co-editor Kingshuk is going to talk about the various chapters. Simultaneously, along with the taxpayer rights, we should also see that there are many reformative changes as we are seeing in the tax administration, whether that's got to do with digitalization, faceless assessment, many of the things that have happened in the past decade or so. All of these now stand very well. Now, where do we go from here? Well, there are two ways to look at it. If I look at my past experiences, when I haven't appeared before a tax official, at least for 2 decades now, but when I was appearing for assessment and before Commissioner of Appeals, the experiences, the good experiences were more an outlier. So you know what happened to majority of those experiences. I have shared some of my experiences in the book. I have talked about some of the landmark cases which hit the court, whether it's the Ricky Martin case as to how he was cross-examined by the tax officials in a hotel close to the Indira Gandhi International Airport in 1997 for 2 hours. And 16 years after that, the Delhi High Court passed strictures against the tax department as to how an ambassador like Ricky Martin, who was a famous Puerto Rican singer, was treated by tax officials in India. I've also spoken about the large taxpayer unit experiences of some of the large multinational corporations. And an initiative which was launched with so much fanfare resulted in being not implemented properly by the tax officials. I've also spoken about the famous arrest of a CFO of a travel portal company by service tax officials, and how it took him 4 days to get a bail from the Metropolitan Magistrate up until the time the Delhi High Court passed strictures against the officials, including calling the officials to the High Court to be cross-examined as to understand the procedure, how the official was arrested. Of course, subsequently, this decision was affirmed by the Supreme Court as well, and none other than Justice Sikri presided on that matter. So what inspired me was, one, our nation's serious resolve to reform the tax administrative system, the kind of changes that we are experiencing. I hope that all of these that we have articulated in this treatise is taken forward. Our job has just started. We intend taking forward this research by way of an open dialogue with the lawmakers to make sure that this taxpayer charter that is taking shape stands out and changes the perception of India from a tax administrative standpoint, as well as improves our index on competitiveness of the nation to make investments domestic and internationally. With that, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Over to you, Kinshuk.
You're on mute, sir.
Tani, thank you so much for that introduction to our work and also setting the context with respect to how exactly taxpayer rights in India, they have a very important role to play when it comes to the overall idea of citizenship also for that matter. Because the anecdotes which you have shared with respect to different perils which taxpayers have faced time and again over here, they depict in a way the state of affairs when it comes to policy making. They depict how things have been over the period of time. And thankfully, in 2020, the Taxpayer Charter, when it was introduced, the legal sanction which it received in the form of Section 119A of the Income Tax Act, that definitely, in our, I think, shared opinion, is a game changer. Having said that, again, thank you so much for the introduction. And now, as you have already mentioned, unfortunately, Dr. Bibek Debroy, Chairman, Economic Advisory Council to Prime Minister of India, he could not join us because of an urgent commitment which he had today. Nevertheless, he has very kindly shared a video message for us on this issue of taxpayer rates. So I would just request the IT team to play the video now.
I'm delighted that this book is being launched. It's a wonderful book. I'm sorry that I cannot physically be present on the occasion. I had some other commitments, prior commitments. There has been talk of a taxpayers' charter. There are taxpayers' charters in other countries also. And in India also, there has been mention of a taxpayers' charter in the economic survey, and it was introduced in the budget. The essential issue, the essential principle behind payment of all kinds of taxes, whether it is direct taxes or indirect taxes, is exceedingly simple. The mala fide taxpayer who indulges in tax evasion must be punished, but the bona fide taxpayer should not be harassed. The problem with this proposition, of course, is that a priori, in the words of economists, we use the expression ex ante. Ex ante, I don't necessarily know whether a particular action has been mala fide or bona fide. It is only after the process of investigation, as is the case with jurisprudence in general, justice delivery in general, that I know ex post whether someone is guilty or innocent. The issue therefore boils down to simplifying procedures so that there isn't unnecessary harassment. So far as taxation is concerned, there are the indirect taxes, which are part of the GST Council, and there are indeed arguments for simplifying and streamlining the GST process. When we are talking about the taxpayers' charter, we're essentially talking about administrative reforms on the part of the department, and we are primarily talking about direct taxes, which not only means the corporate sector, it also means personal income taxes, and I should quickly mention that unincorporated enterprise also pays personal income taxes. And indeed, given the requirements on the part of finances by governments, union government as well as state governments, the tax GDP ratio in India should be much higher.
All right. I think that's an incredible message by Dr. Debroy, which sets an economic context as well to the idea of taxpayer rights and why exactly it has a role, how much of an important role it has with respect to tax GDP ratio of the country as well. So on that note, as much as we wish Dr. Debroy could have joined us personally, I would also like to mention that Dr. De Broglie, we met him in person. We presented a copy of the book to him, and he was kind enough to quote our work, the policy recommendations which we had in our book, in one of his editorial pieces as well. So we wish that we can host Dr. De Broglie on another day as well. With that, I now move on to our chief guest of the evening, Justice Sikri. Professor Rajkumar, you have already introduced Justice Sikri a bit, but let me please do the honors again. So Justice Sikri is an eminent jurist and a former judge of the Supreme Court of India. Presently, he is an international judge at the Singapore International Commercial Court. He's also the chairperson of News Broadcasting Standards Authority, amongst his various other inspirational achievements. So we now request you to share your thoughts on the book and the subject of taxpayer rights in India to mark the virtual launch of our work, which is Taxpayer Rights, the Charter of India. So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kinshuk, for your generous introduction. Mr. Bhutani and you, who are the co-authors of the book, or co-editors, I would say, and the stars of the day, along with other authors who have contributed. Mr. Rajkumar, Vice Chancellor of, I can today say that, most prestigious and the best law school of the country, and in top ranking schools as when we see it globally as well, which is, I think, the only law school which has made its mark on a global level. And of course, Mr. Datar, Arvind Datar, a very accomplished lawyer, a gentleman to the core. And if I may say, I have found, there may be others also, but I may be ignorant about that, but a unique combination of expertise in constitutional law and taxation, which Palkiwala had, today I find in Mr. Datar. It is, I have seen him in action in the courts. I have seen his articles. I have seen his books, the books which he edited also. So he's not only an expert in the constitutional law, but taxation as well. And whenever I see his approach, I'm always reminded of Palkiwala and the way he used to write. And I think that's why he is the best inheritor who is nowadays, who has taken over the charge of updating the book on income tax written by Kanga and Palkiwala. So it's really a unique occasion and a pleasure for me and an honor to me to be on this occasion and be a part of this book launch on the rights of the taxpayers' rights, deciphering the Indian Charter. As Mr. Bhutani and thereafter Mr. Jha as well have already mentioned as to what this book is about, and more importantly, what is this Indian Charter about, which talks of, or which is now contained in section 119A with this amendment in this year about the taxpayer rights. This has been the debate, as Mr. Bhutani has also said, about this charter in not only European Union and in America, but in many other countries as well. I find that there has always been a debate about whether to pay taxes or not, which Mr. Rajkumar, Professor Rajkumar, very brilliantly brought out in his introductory remarks. And the rationale behind it, there have been criticism that there are some persons who think that taxes should not be paid at all, or what they feel that we pay the taxes to the government, but in return, nothing is given to us or even to the community as such. And of course, there are, the other side to it also, that how without taxes and unless the revenue is generated, how the government should function, how they would do public projects, etc., which are to be undertaken, all the welfare measures which are to be undertaken, how it should be done. And the recent example is of the COVID. If the government has spent so much money merely on vaccination, where we have been able to administer more than 1 billion doses to the Indian community, and most of it has been free. How it could have been if the taxes are not recovered, whether direct or indirect. So I'm not going into the debate on the duty to pay taxes or the right of the state to levy taxes. I'm reminded of what Benjamin Franklin has said, and that becomes, I think that is a harsh reality or pleasant reality, whichever way you call it. He said, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. So the two things which he said are certain are death and taxes. So if taxes are so certain like death, then we are going to have, and that is the regime in all the countries, and we are going to have such a regime in most of the countries. Of course, we have tax havens, no doubt, but then their income is through other means. And I'm reminded of one article written by Professor Upendra Bakshi. Of course, one would be really surprised, Professor Bakshi writing about tax laws. But then, of course, it was a constitutional angle which he mentioned, and which he stated that he said that elimination of tax havens is a human rights issue. So he took it as a constitutional or as a human rights issue. And here, when he's talking about tax havens, it's not only the tax haven jurisdictions, like we have Mauritius or we have some other jurisdiction in the world. And but he was saying that even certain classes of persons who are exempted from paying tax, that kind of, he calls that also a tax haven, and he says that it is a human rights issue and it should not be there. So therefore, debate is there, and one thing is certain, that the taxes we will have to pay. But what becomes important is, as I said, that tone is already set by the earlier speakers, that is the rights of the taxpayers, or the honest and bona fide taxpayers, as is stated, and mala fide, or the dishonest taxpayers. So that is always there. And the problem in the process which arises is that the mistrust between the taxpayers on the one hand and the tax administration on the other hand, that has always been there. An honest taxpayer always feels that, look, in spite of paying taxes, I am harassed. And the tax administrator or the commissioner of income tax always feels, even if a person has paid tax, heavy tax, still he must have evaded some tax. And there has to be tax evasion, and I have to look into this, where that tax evasion is there. So with that kind, like a police officer, if a crime is committed and he has to investigate into the crime, so he thinks, he goes with the presumption that the income tax return which is filed, or any other return under indirect taxes is also filed, there must be some leakage somewhere, there must be some evasion somewhere, and with that kind of eagle eye, he looks into all that. So therefore, there has to be always a mistrust. Yeah, Professor Rajkumar had given a very good example of the property which he bought. And at that time, he bought the property with 100% payment in check. But I'm not sure whether the income tax officer would have seen or would have even believed that the entire money which is paid is in check. Because that is the psyche, that is, has become an order of the day. And it is this kind of mistrust between the taxpayer on the one hand and the tax administrator on the other hand, that we need such a charter. That was, and if I remember, even in this budget, while introducing it, the finance minister, she had very clearly, acknowledged this fact. She said that a tax system requires trust between taxpayer and the administration. This will be possible only when taxpayer rights are clearly demarcated. And that led to this introduction or insertion of section 119A. If we see when I talk about this mistrust, the tax regime in this country, of course, it is the right of any state to impose tax, but then the tax regime also has to be rational. And many times, and in India particularly, we have seen different times. We had time in 70s, mid 70s, when the income tax was 97 point, I think Mr. Bhutani will correct me, I think 97.5 or 97.75%. So 100 rupees if you are earning, you keep 2 rupees or 2 rupees 25 paisa with you, and you pay to the government 97.7. After, of course, it was slab, but the highest slab was like that. Now, how you expect the taxpayers to be honest? I remember we were at that time students, but I remember some of the stalwarts in legal profession who were honest taxpayers. They said that after practicing for a certain period or after having certain income, we will not appear in the courts. We will not generate more income. Why we should earn if we have to pay to the government only? So therefore, and Mr. Datar has in his book, which he has edited, Guide to Central Excise Law and Practice, and as I said, he has mentioned, the fresh editions of Palkiwala book on tax, which he has come out with, and I may quote him as well, because he is an authority on this. And he says that the growth in India has primarily been diminutive because of two main economic illusions. He says, what are those illusions? And of course, Palkiwala had said so, which he has mentioned in the book. First being that by levying higher tax rates, collection of revenue will be higher, while the second being that by enriching the government, you can enrich the nation. So therefore, both are illusions, which Palkiwala said, and which is repeated by him in his book, that on the contrary, the statistics or the history has shown where the tax rates are reasonable, more people tend to pay taxes because nobody wants to be dishonest. If you ask a person to pay 97.75 rupees out of 100 which you earn to taxpayer, you are making persons dishonest, as either a person will not earn, which is not good for the country in any case, or if he earns or she earns, she will not pay honestly the taxes because he would like to pay in that manner. So that there has been a history, and I need not go into that as to in India how in 1985 for the first time there was some reforms made. Thereafter, when we entered liberalization and globalization in 1991, there have been that they always attempt or endeavor on the part of the government from time to time, or we can say the legislature, that yes, tax regime should be as simple as possible, which is understood by a commoner. But problem is in action or in practice, the mistrust has remained. So that is what is the irony. And in this scenario, coming out with this kind of book of the Taxpayers Charter and the Indian Charter or the Taxpayer Charter, and what are the rights of the taxpayers, and in the process trying to enlighten not only the taxpayers, but the tax administrators also, that what are their duties, how they have to discharge, and they have to shake off that kind of mindset that everybody is thief, everybody is evading the tax. And even if the person has paid one of the highest, in numerical terms, the tax, but still he must have done something wrong. So this has to go. And in this process, this kind of charter and this kind of book, as Mr. Bhutani has already said, that in India, there is no book of this kind. So I must commend Mr. Bhutani and Mr. Jha, who are the editors of this book. And I have gone through this book. I could not read it fully, of course, and I would like to, much before this function was planned and conceptualized or thought of today's, immediately after the publication of this book, Mr. Bhutani had sent me the copy of this book, and the chapterization itself is unique, I would say, and in Indian context, a very first endeavor or venture of this kind, where they talk not only about the overview of the tax administration in India and go into the history as to what it has happened, and thereafter how the evolution of taxpayer rights in India has shaped and has come to this stage. And on that, there have been many, few of the authors have written the articles, and in the process, they also talk about digitalization of tax administration, that when you have no face, assessment, there may be, which was introduced a couple of years ago, that the person who is going to assess would be faceless, and the taxpayer would not know who is going to assess. So that it maybe the purpose behind it is that it would diminish or reduce corruption, but then it has its own difficulties or hazards also, which are beautifully captured and which are being discussed. And I remember Mr. Datar also in one of his speeches on one occasion talking about it. And then on the policy recommendations they have made, but very interesting thing which I have found in this book is, which is on the, and this is one of the annexures, which is a survey on taxpayer rights conducted by CCIT and BMR. So that survey which they had conducted, and I had gone through the kind of questionnaire which is put, and I think after the survey is complete, I don't know whether it has been completed or not, it would, and some of the anecdotes or some of the things which Mr. Bhutani has said are in the book, but then it is going to be a watershed. I think the conclusions or the findings of this research should be remarkable and may contribute to the better administration of taxation in this country. I would end by saying one thing, that as I said, that Professor Bakshi has talked about elimination of tax havens, which is a human rights issue. So therefore, the message is that it should be the duty of the taxpayers to pay the taxes honestly, and there should not be tax havens. Likewise, when we see the other side, that the taxpayers, and when we are talking about the harassment in spite of paying the taxes, which many suffer, and there are many anecdotes. We know, as a judge, I have seen many such things, as a lawyer, I have seen, and many come and tell us also. There's no time to narrate all those, but I would say in our constitution, part 3, which talks of human rights, of fundamental rights. And my hypothesis is, on which I have written a lot in judgments also, in articles also, that the entire edifice of human rights is based on dignity of human being. And when I talk of this charter and the rights of taxpayers, I would say that it should be, at least this realization should come, those who administer the taxation or the administrator of taxation, the tax offices, that you should keep in mind the dignity of that taxpayer, which is very, very important. Treat him with dignity, because it is that community which is filling the coffers of the government, and on the basis of which government is able to spend so much. So therefore, if they are treated with dignity and they are not seen as thieves or luteras, then I think we may see better tax administration, and we can only hope about it. So with that, I again congratulate Mr. Bhutani and Mr. Jha. I think it's a unique combination of a tax lawyer and practitioner on the one hand, and an academician on the other hand, to come together and see this. The universities can do a lot about it, because teachers are looking into the subject, as Professor Rajkumar has said about the research, etc., which O.P. Jindal School is known for. And as I said, there are so many, 35 or how many projects which are going on, and 500 teachers who are there and engaged in some or the other projects. But what I feel is that messages going from teachers or teaching community after thorough research may have more significant reach and may have more, maybe more appealing to the tax administration. So therefore, particularly Professor Jha, congratulations to you also joining Mr. Mukesh Bhutani. Of course, Mr. Mukesh Bhutani has written lots of books, and is one such lawyer like Mr. Datar, who is not only a lawyer or practicing, but an academician as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Justice Sikri, for your enlightening views on taxpayer rights and obligations. I'm sure your comments, they have given all of us who have been involved in this project a new insight as to how to take the work forward. So your comment particularly on the presumption of guilt is a point which we have tried to explore in the work already. We agree that verification of either side, taxpayer or tax administrators, does not lead to a constructive exercise, but a dialogue would be the real way to go ahead. In this context, I recall the befitting words of Jamaican national poet Claude McKay, which we have used in the book as well. Idealism is like a castle in the air if it is not based on solid foundation of social and political realism. With these words, I would now like to invite Mr. Arvind Datar, Senior Advocate, Madras High Court. Mr. Datar, as Justice Sikri has also mentioned, Mr. Bhutani has mentioned, he is one of the legal stalwarts which we have in the domain of tax laws in India. He has worked on several authoritative texts with respect to taxation laws in India. It is our privilege to have you, sir. We would request you to please share your thoughts about the book and the larger issue of taxpayer rights. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you hear me clearly? Thank you so much. First of all, let me congratulate Mukesh Bhutani, Kinshuk Jha, and the entire team for bringing out this book on a very unusual subject, taxpayers' rights. We normally talk of commentaries on tax or interpretation of tax. Very, very rarely we have thought of the concept of taxpayers' rights. I must also congratulate Jindal Law College, Jindal Global University for taking the initiative of releasing this book. This ensures that the book gets a much wider audience. I had the chance of reading the book in greater detail when I wrote a small comment about the book which has been produced. And I was really happy to see the Prime Minister announcing the Citizens' Charter. It's just a 1.5 page document, but which summarizes what essentially a tax system should have. That is trust, transparency, clarity, certainty, and so on. The only thing is that we'll have to see where the rubber meets the road. What concrete steps have been taken to reduce taxpayer harassment, to reduce respect for rights. Before I start, I must say that it's a personal privilege to be sharing the dais with Justice Sikri. It's always been a pleasure to appear before him, and I will not be exaggerating to say that it is judges like Justice Sikri who are the real guardians of taxpayers' rights. I mean, as long as he was there, we were certain that some relief will definitely get relief at the Supreme Court, if not at the High Court. In fact, he does not know it, but in one case, the Madras High Court started dismissing every writ petition for reopening assessment, saying there's an alternate remedy. relying on one judgment. And a batch of 149 cases came before Justice Sikri. And within 25 minutes, he said, this is not the approach. He set aside the High Court judgment. We all went back. And then many people got relief. Unfortunately, many High Court judges don't realize that the alternate remedy sometimes is a myth. And you don't know the kind of harassment a SSC has to undergo. Well, I must say that having finished almost 42 years at the bar and most of it in the tax side, I've had the privilege of or had the opportunity of practicing both on direct and indirect taxes. And unfortunately, the problems in the system have remained the same for over 4 decades. Right from the time I was a junior till now, I find broadly the problems remain the same. One thing I noticed that many of the officers involved are very bright. I mean, you cannot pass the Indian Revenue Service exam unless you have got some capability, some capacity. So many of the officers know exactly that what the order they are passing may not be correct, but they are helpless. Why is that so? What is the reason for having such kind of problems in the system? And as Justice Sikri mentioned, I've had this opportunity, like Mukesh, of dealing with many multinational clients. And perhaps the biggest problem they face is the tax system in India. I am doing a comparative study of tax systems in Malaysia, China, Vietnam, and Thailand. And I've just personally commissioned a study with some friends at the China Institute and so on to find out what is the tax system. What puzzled me was that Vietnam, a small country like Vietnam, exports $33 billion of mobile phones. Now, my question is, why couldn't those phones be made in India? Why is our soil not good enough for people to start factories in India, start manufacturing in India? Even today, our manufacture is not crossed the 14% of GDP mark. We expect it to be 20-25%. In China, it's almost 28% of the GDP. In India, not even 14%. What is the reason? Why are people going to Vietnam? 2 of my friends who own large garment factories, they've all shifted to Vietnam. What is the reason? And again, the answer is the tax system. I'll just give one example because we have to wind up by 5 o'clock. I'm appearing for a number of multinational car companies. And one large car company, which all of us know of, is quite popular in India also. And the CFO came from his parent country. And in the midst of the litigation, he told me that the global sales of that car multinational in India is 2.2% of the global sales are in India, but 96% of the litigation is in India. So this is a strange reality because this really upsets people. And you see, it's not that the moment Nokia closed down in Madras, why did Nokia close down? Because suddenly one officer came up and said that 27,000 crores of exports done by Nokia to 94 countries. In fact, Nokia chose India over China at the behest of Mr. Shourie. They assured that they will set up. So they set up a plant in India. 6 years down the line, 27,000 crores of exports done over 6 years. Assessment for sales taxes was simply reopened on the ground that all these export sales are interstate sales. And since there is no C form, 12% tax is levied. Then we had to go to the court, get a stay and so on. But then you can be rest assured that there is no investment coming from Finland after that. So the point is we have to do something to ensure that, as Justice Sikri mentioned, that there must be some kind of certainty. There cannot be certain element of arbitrariness. Now, in my opinion, unless we have solved 2 basic problems, and Justice Sikri will be perhaps better equipped than me to analyze this problem. One is we have to abolish revenue targets. Again and again, I find that as a lawyer, from January to March, the number of writ petitions filed from January to March is more than the writ petitions filed from June to December. I've been practicing in many high courts. Every time we used to run, there's a reassessment started in January just to meet a revenue target. Secondly, the other thing is that I find the major problem of our tax system, whether it is service tax or VAT or so on and so forth, all work in independent silos. They don't realize that taxes are a means to an end. See, taxes are the result of growth. Only when you have growth, you'll have taxes. But if you start collecting taxes minus growth, then you're going to be in serious problem. Like this Nokia case in Tamil Nadu. The Nokia factory shut down, workers lost their jobs. So you didn't collect any tax, but enormous damage was done to the economy. Take the Vodafone retrospective. At the end of the day, what did we achieve? We couldn't collect any tax. At the same time, the damage done to the economy was so enormous. Because we're talking of taxpayers' rights. If Vodafone or Kane or all these companies had bought and sold shares in 2005, 2006, 2007, then it is very, very difficult to tell them in 2012 that these transactions are liable to tax and you pay tax now. So these are again violation of taxpayer rights, which we have to be very careful about. The other difficulty is that the officers, I don't know how far this is relevant, Mr. Bhutani will tell me. One particular problem is the fear of the officers allowing the appeals or granting relief for fear of vigilance or fear of other department proceedings. Unless there is a clear indication that decisions taken by them will not be disturbed, will not be questioned, their CRs or whatever promotion will not be based on how many assessments they confirm, that is the best thing. You know, in the matter which Justice Sikri set aside, we took an RTI application as to how many cases where assessments were reopened, where the assessing officer accepted the contention of the department and dropped it. Only one case for 2 lakhs. In all other cases, everything was automatically confirmed. In central excise, in sales tax, once a show cause notice is issued, it is almost certain that the demand will be confirmed. And if any relief you get, it will only be in terms of going to the High Court or the Supreme Court. Now that the book is written, I would be grateful if Jindal Law School or the team does a follow-up, does an empirical study when reassessment notices are issued and how many cases it has, how many cases the officer really dropped the proceedings. How many cases was the reopening done contrary to a Supreme Court judgment? How many cases the reopening was done contrary to a statutory provision? Because there is no accountability. An officer can simply reopen an assessment and anything can be done. Just now a young lawyer came from Pune and he was telling me that under the new e-way bill, just because the truck number was noted, one number was noted wrongly in the e-way bill, they made a demand of 4 crores. They said the entire value of the consignment of the truck had to be paid. And the sections are so draconian that you have to pay the amount first before you can go on appeal. Then till then the truck is stuck. So today 20 to 30% of the writ petitions are filed on that ground. But the situation is not very bleak. I'll tell you a silver lining, which is a proper approach which the government took. Justice Sikri will know that under the Excise Act, we have pre-deposit of duty, and so many writs would have come before you, sir, in the Delhi High Court for against pre-deposit. Look at the way the government solved the problem in an excellent manner, which is a very good example which can be duplicated. They simply, because when I was a junior and I was practicing on the excise side, appearing in the excise tribunals in different parts of the country, half or 70% time would be spent on waiver of pre-deposit. Arguing the application for waiver itself would take 2-3 hours because if 150 crores are demanded, then it would be argued. The government did a wonderful thing. They simply said pre-deposit is 7.5% of the duty, subject to a maximum of 10 crores. Subject to a maximum of 10 crores. So even if your demand is 400 crores, you simply pay 10 crores and you go on an appeal. Now, that has been such a great boon. The number of writ petitions have completely crashed as far as excise is concerned. But look at what has happened in income tax. The amendment to the Income Tax Act says if you want to appeal to the tribunal, it is 20% of the duty plus interest plus penalty. Now, you know that if the matter is pending for 7 years with interest at 18% or 24%, it is impossible for a client to pay 20%. So, my suggestion is like Jindal can make a recommendation. Why not have the excise model across all tax cases, whether it is service tax or income tax or VAT, everywhere make a pre-deposit of 7.5% subject to 10 crores. Go on appeal, there will be no litigation, no cases. Judges like Justice Sikri can devote their time to deciding important questions of law. So, the other point which I wanted to mention was, in my practice, I found that harsh laws have never solved the problem. In 1975, Justice Vanshu Committee recommended that if you make stringent punishment to the tax laws, tax collection will go up. That's why you see all the amendments in 75, there was a major shift in excise provisions. Imprisonment became mandatory. If it's more than 1 lakh, minimum 6 months imprisonment. Second conviction, 7 years imprisonment. Burden of proof shifted to the assessee. Presumption of guilt raised. So all the criminal provisions which we have studied in law college that everybody is innocent till proved guilty became just ulta, became the reverse. Everybody was guilty till proved innocent. But did that raise conviction? Did that collect taxes? Answer is no. Everywhere you find that wherever punishment has become harsher, it has reduced the conviction rate. In fact, I'm one of the team for deciding prizes for the essays in Indian Law Review. This year's winner is a lady who did a survey on making imprisonment compulsory after the Nirbhaya incident. And she has analyzed some 1400 cases, and she's found actually conviction rate has gone down after making the punishment more harsh. So the lesson to be learnt is today GST above 2 crores, any officer can arrest. So these are the provisions which are counterproductive rather than helping the country. And let us not forget, we have a long way to go. We have this talk of 5 trillion economy. See, it's very sad if you see the Fortune 500, only 7 Indian companies are in Fortune 500. There are 137 Chinese companies, their population just as India. So we'll have to introspect as to why we are still not reaching the target of economic growth. And my personal view is, unless you respect taxpayers' rights, as Justice Sikri rightly pointed out, these are wealth creators. You can't treat them as prima facie criminals, don't give them any benefits, simply dismiss the cases as saying alternate remedy. This is not going to work. And I think the solution is, as I suggested, start with abolishing revenue targets. Try it for 2 years. Let's see what happens. Try to make sure that the officer is not subject to any kind of thing if he passes a particular order. And all these tribunals, in fact, my happiest times were spent in the income tax tribunal in the early 80s, where we had fantastic tribal members. And it's very interesting. I'll just conclude with that. When the tribunal first came in 1939 and it started working in 1941, the then British government said that tribunal must be independent, and they placed it in the law ministry. So all the tribal members were not subject to finance ministry control. And as Justice Sikri knows, Justice Ranganathan was the president. We had the most outstanding members of the tribunal. Even when the authority for advance ruling was started, you had Justice Ranganathan, Justice Said Shah Qadri, Justice P.V. Reddy. Great, it was such a pleasure appearing before them, and it raised huge amount of investor confidence. A person who's going to invest $500 million, he knows, I go to this place, it is headed by Justice Sikri, I will get proper justice and I'll know my position. But then what do? You replace it by commissioners. You destroy the institution. So this taxpayers' rights is a system where ultimately the taxpayer is a person who contributes to growth. Partly, now everybody contributes, but large SSCs contribute larger amounts to growth. The moment the taxpayers know that their rights are protected, the rights are safe, not at the High Court level and not at the Supreme Court level. We can't have too many Justice Sikris. They are in a minority, unfortunately. But at the lower level also, you should have officers who I know will not pass absurd orders, will go a long way in achieving our target of a 5 trillion economy, generating jobs and so on. This is not just taxpayers' rights, it's a larger national problem which you have to see in that perspective. And just as the speed of the slowest ship is the speed of the convoy, a bad tax system will always hobble and cripple economic growth. That's my personal view. So I hope that this book is the first step towards the government realizing that the more you are fair, the more you will get in return. The return on investment on fairness is very, very high. Thank you so much. And I particularly thank all of you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to see Justice Sikri after a long, long time. I think after you retired, I have not seen you, sir, for the last couple of years. Thanks to COVID also, we could not meet. But nice to see all of you. Wish you all the very best. And Mr. Rajkumar, I'll just tell you one happy note on mine. Whatever properties I have bought, at least I don't know if Chennai has got a different thing, but I've never had to have this 60, 40, 80, 20. Everything was in white. Thank you.
I'm happy to hear that, yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Datar, for those wonderfully insightful points which you have made with respect to taxpayer rights, not just being an issue in isolation, but rather it's having a ramification on trade, economics, and investment issues as well. It's a larger national sort of debate which we have entered into now. And that's what the purpose of this book has been. We have made a detailed study of the overall standing of taxpayer rights in India vis-a-vis the obligations which are, of course, there. And not just that, we have also looked into the constitutional provisions which have been offered so far. In addition to that, we have looked into the comparative, I would say, insights from different jurisdictions. All in all, we have compared 18 jurisdictions in this book, including we have also brought in certain international, you would say, recommendations or best standards which have been recommended by United Nations, OECD, IMF, World Bank, and the IBFT. So the work is pretty comprehensive when it comes to understand that where exactly do we stand with respect to the protection framework which we are offering to our taxpayers and investors alike. Having said that, one interesting domain which we have tried to explore through this book is the idea of taxpayer psychology, because many a times it's assumed that taxpayers, they willfully do not want to pay taxes, but the issues could be manifold. In that context, one particular project which we want to take forward is also to understand the psyche of tax administrators. We want to have some sort of analysis. We want to have some sort of empirical study as to how exactly are the difficulties, or what exactly are the difficulties which tax administrators face when it comes to proper and fair implementation of the tax regime in India. So that's another advancement which we are looking for as far as the project is concerned. And since we have overshot the session time, I would quickly like to conclude by the final point, where exactly we are planning to take the project forward, in which direction. One major point which Mukesh and I have been discussing with respect to our future ideas on the project is probably the interface, or the sort of I would say discussions which have already started in context of Pillar 2 solutions. So we are not just restricting our research to taxpayer rights in India. We are also trying to understand it in a global context, because if we talk about the phenomena of global minimum corporate taxation, which is something which is an imminent happening, it's just a matter of time that we will be having it in our systems. How exactly its repercussions will be on taxpayers going forward, how exactly its interaction would be with international law principles, that is something which we are willing to explore as a part of our upcoming projects. With that, thank you so much to all our esteemed speakers for this evening. Thank you so much to our chief guest, Justice Sikri, for your wonderful insights as far as the overall issue of taxpayer rights, obligations in India is concerned. Thank you
He's
so much.
actually in a family function, and we requested him to be out of it for a brief moment. So thank you so much, sir, for that.
That's the advantage of virtual. I'm in Chandigarh at present.
Oh.
Really appreciate it, sir. Really.
How's the pollution there? Better.
Yeah, much better.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Datar. Thank you, Professor Rajkumar. Thank you, Mr. Bhutani. And thank you for everyone who has joined into this event. Sana, thank you to you as well, despite the internet connection issue. And we hope to involve all of you in our future discussions on this really engaging topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks.
All the best.
Thank you, sir.